Hello guys, welcome to my channel where we bring you the latest and most captivating Nollywood movie storylines. If you're new here, please take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our upcoming updates, including the freshest and most exciting Nollywood stories. We are dedicated to sharing plots that will not only entertain you but also inspire and keep you engaged. Today, we're going to dive into an intriguing storyline that I know you'll find both entertaining and thought-provoking. Trust me, by the end of this, you'll be inspired and thoroughly entertained. So, without further ado, let's get started and dive right into it. Now, let's go. It all started with two brothers, David and Daniel, navigating the gritty streets. Believing they were orphans, the boys had learned to survive by pickpocketing and causing trouble, blending into the chaos of the urban jungle. Each day was a challenge for them. Every theft, every scuffle with the law, a way to feed their uncertain future. Meanwhile, at Barrister Ben's office, a storm was brewing. Sam, the adopted son of the late Chief Lawson, was pacing angrily, his voice rising with frustration. He demanded the will, insisting that as the everything rightfully belonged to him, but Barrister Ben remained steadfast. "Your father gave me strict instructions," Ben said coldly, his eyes steady. "It's not your time yet, and I intend to respect his wishes." Sam's face twisted with fury. Known for his selfishness, he wasn't about to be denied what he believed was his. With clenched fists and bitter words, he stormed out of the office, leaving Barrister Ben with an uneasy feeling. The will held secrets Sam wasn't prepared for. The next day, as the sun began to set, David and Daniel, still tangled in their daily mischief, noticed a young woman on the street. She was impeccably dressed, her sharp features softened by the nervous glances she cast around, a perfect target. She carried a sleek leather bag, valuable enough to catch their eye. They moved quickly, rehearsed in their roles. Daniel distracted her, bumping into her with a casual apology, while David swooped in and snatched the bag, disappearing into the crowd before she could even react. The woman stood frozen for a moment, realizing her bag and everything inside was gone. Panic set in. This wasn't just any bag, it contained crucial documents, things she couldn't afford to lose. She frantically searched the street, her heart pounding, but the twins had vanished. Tears welled in her eyes as her mind raced. How could she face Barrister Ben now? Unbeknownst to the twins, the contents of that bag would tie them to a web of secrets far darker than they could ever imagine. And soon, they'd realised that their past, believed to be long buried, was connected to the very will Sam was desperate to get his hands on. David and Daniel retreated to their hideout, a crumbling, abandoned building on the edge of the city where they felt safe from prying eyes. They eagerly opened the stolen bag, expecting to find money or something of immediate value. But as they emptied the contents, their faces fell. No cash, no jewellery, just a single document. Frustrated, David tossed the papers aside, grumbling under his breath. Nothing useful in here, just some legal nonsense. Daniel, calmer and more curious, picked up the document. He scanned the papers carefully, and his eyes widened. This isn't just any document, David. It's a will, and it looks like an original copy. David shot him an impatient look. So what? There's no money in it, is there? No, Daniel replied, but this could be important. It has an address on it. Maybe we should return it. David scoffed, crossing his arms defiantly. Return it? Are you crazy? We'll get caught and then it's straight to jail for us. You know what they do to people like us in prison, right? You think they'll just let us walk away with a slap on the wrist? But Daniel, ever the logical thinker, pressed on. Look, it's an original copy. If we don't return it, whoever it belongs to could lose everything. And besides... He trailed off, eyes fixed on a particular line in the will. His voice grew shaky. David, our names, they're on here. David frowned, leaning closer. He grabbed the document from Daniel's hands and scanned it himself. His jaw tightened. There it was, clear as day, David Lawson and Daniel Lawson. David chuckled darkly, waving the document dismissively. There are 1,000 Davids and Daniels in the world. This doesn't mean anything. But Daniel wasn't so sure. His heart pounded as a nagging thought took root in his mind. After a heated argument, David insisting they forget about the will, and Daniel desperate to uncover the truth, they finally reached a decision. They would return the document. But as they gathered their things, a sense of unease hung in the air. Returning the will wasn't just about doing the right thing anymore. It was about discovering a past they had long believed lost, and it was tied to something or someone far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. It took David and Daniel much longer than expected to locate the address printed on the will. The streets were unfamiliar, the buildings tall and imposing, a stark contrast to the back alleys they were used to. When they finally arrived at the office, they were met with layers of security and protocols, all designed to keep people like them out. Yet, they persisted, sneaking past the watchful eyes of staff and weaving through corridors, using their street smarts to blend in. When they finally stood before Barrister Ben, the twins were exhausted but determined. The barrister, caught off guard, eyed them with suspicion. He wasn't expecting anyone, least of all two scruffy boys from the street. "We have something that belongs to you," Daniel said coolly, pulling the will from under his jacket. He handed it over, watching the barrister's eyes widen with shock as he recognized the document. "How did you get this?" Barrister Ben's voice was low, a mix of disbelief and urgency. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the boys, sensing there was more to this than they were letting on. "I'll do whatever you ask, but you need to tell me how you came into possession of this will." The twins exchanged a quick glance. David, the more cunning of the two, saw an opportunity. "We'll tell you, but for 100,000 naira, the barrister raised an eyebrow. His surprise quickly shifted to calculation. "I'll double it, 200,000 naira, but I need answers now." Daniel's eyes widened at the offer, but before he could speak, David cut in. "Deal." They explained how they had stolen the bag off a woman's shoulder, assuming there was money inside, only to discover the legal document instead. David and Daniel, riding high on their sudden windfall, wasted no time heading to the nearest ATM. The rush of making 200,000 naira in a single day had them giddy with excitement. It felt like they were finally catching a break after years of struggling. But just as they were about to withdraw the cash, Daniel's face paled. He frantically patted his pockets, and his expression fell in defeat. "What is it?" David asked, frowning. "My purse with my ATM card. I left it in the bag in Barrister Ben's office," Daniel replied, his voice shaky. The thrill of the money evaporated, replaced by a creeping sense of dread. David cursed under his breath, frustrated but knowing they had no choice. "Great, now we have to go back there." Nervous about facing Barrister Ben again, but with no other option, they decided to return, hoping to retrieve Daniel's ATM card without causing any more trouble. Later that same day, they made their way back to the office. As they entered, they were greeted with an almost knowing look from Barrister Ben. It was clear he had already gone through everything they had left behind. He didn't seem surprised to see them walk back in. Well, do you have more information you're trying to sell me this time?" Barrister Ben asked with a raised eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. David, always the more defensive one, shook his head. "No, we're just here to get my brother's ATM card. It was in the bag." The barrister leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms as he studied them both. "Is that so?" He paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Before I give you the card, I want to ask you a few questions. It's odd, you see. Your names, David and Daniel Lawson, keep coming up." The twins exchanged a confused glance, but hesitantly nodded. They had no idea where this was leading, but something in the barrister's tone made them uneasy. Barrister Ben leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with curiosity. "Tell me about your family, your parents. Where are you from?" Caught off guard, David answered first, his voice uncertain. My name's David Lawson, and this is my brother Daniel. As for our parents, we don't really know much." He hesitated, trying to piece together the fragments of his fractured childhood into words. "Our mother died when we were little. After that, we were left with our grandmother, but she passed away just a few months later. We've been on our own since then, living on the streets, doing what we can to survive." The barrister's expression softened slightly, but there was something intense in his gaze, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. "And your father?" David shrugged, trying to sound nonchalant, but a hint of bitterness crept into his voice. "We never knew him. All we ever heard was that he was dead." For a moment, the room was silent. Barrister Ben sat back, looking at the twins with a mix of surprise and something else, something deeper. His mind raced. The names, their story, it was all too familiar, and it made his pulse quicken. Could it be possible? Could these boys be tied to the very thing that had been haunting him since Chief Lawson's death? David and Daniel shifted uncomfortably under his intense gaze, confused by the sudden tension in the air. They were just two street kids trying to get by, so why was this man looking at them like they were part of something much bigger? Barrister Ben exhaled slowly, his voice calmer now, but laced with curiosity. Lawson, that's an unusual coincidence, don't you think? And your father, you say you never knew him. Are you sure? David, irritated by the barrage of questions, straightened. Look, we don't know anything about him, okay? We were just kids when he was gone. Now, can we please just get the ATM card and leave? The barrister's gaze lingered on them for a moment longer before he reached into his desk drawer and handed Daniel the small, worn-out purse. Here, he said quietly. But this isn't over. The twins, eager to escape the uncomfortable conversation, grabbed the purse and hurried out of the office. But as they walked away, they couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was happening. The way Barrister Ben had looked at them, the way he seemed to know more than he let on, it gnawed at Daniel's thoughts. David, Daniel whispered as they left the building. What if this means something? What if we're missing something big? David waved him off, trying to mask his own unease. You're overthinking it. We got our money. We got your card. Let's just leave it at that. But deep down, both brothers knew that something far bigger than they could comprehend had just been set in motion, and they were right in the middle of it. Before they could finish, the barrister, true to his word, transferred the money to their account. His fingers danced over his phone screen, the ding of confirmation ringing in the silence. Now tell me, who was carrying this bag? He demanded, still eager to piece together the story. David smirked, sensing the barrister's desperation. Another 20,000 naira and we'll tell you everything. The barrister hesitated for only a moment, then with a sigh he made the transfer. Speak, he ordered, now visibly on edge. Just as Daniel was about to explain, the office door opened and Barrister Ben's secretary entered, dropping off a stack of documents on his desk. She didn't even glance at the twins before slipping out of the room as quickly as she came. That's her, Daniel whispered, his eyes locked on the door. The woman who just left. She's the one we took the bag from. Barrister Ben froze, his face betraying his shock. His secretary? He hadn't expected that. The situation was more complex than he had imagined. He tried to steady his voice. You mean to say my secretary was carrying the will? Daniel nodded. Yeah, we grabbed it off her, but when we realized it was official paperwork and not money, we thought it'd be better to bring it back. David, sensing the tension in the room rising, pulled on his brother's sleeve. Time to go, he muttered. They quickly dropped the will, now stuffed into a plain nylon bag on the barrister's desk. Our business is done, David added, his tone firm. Without another word, the twins turned and hurried out of the office, their hearts racing. But as they left, a mixture of excitement and dread washed over them. What had they just gotten themselves into? David tried to dismiss it, eager to enjoy the money they'd just earned. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was lurking beneath the surface. As the twins vanished into the crowded streets, Barrister Ben sat back in his chair, his mind racing. His secretary was involved, how deeply he didn't yet know. But one thing was clear, this was no ordinary will, and those boys, whether they knew it or not, were now tangled in a web of secrets that went far beyond a stolen bag. Barrister Ben looked at David and Daniel, his expression filled with a mixture of relief and excitement. He cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice measured but full of emotion. There's something you boys need to know about your parents, he said, leaning forward in his chair. David and Daniel exchanged confused glances, unsure of what was coming next. Your father, Chief Lawson, and your mother were deeply in love, Barrister Ben began. But your father's family, his parents, never approved of their relationship. They wanted him to marry someone from a wealthier background, someone who would fit their image. So when they found out your mother was pregnant with the two of you, They forced him to cut all ties with her. The twins listened intently, their confusion slowly giving way to shock. His family relocated abroad almost immediately, making sure he had no way of contacting your mother. They thought that by taking him away, they could erase any connection between them. But what they didn't know, Barrister Ben continued, his voice softening, was that your father had already named you both before he left. He wanted to make it easier to find you when he returned. Daniel's eyes widened as he absorbed the story. He named us before we were born. Barrister Ben nodded. Yes, he never stopped thinking about you. When he finally came back, he searched everywhere for your mother and for you two, but it was as if you had disappeared. There was no trace of either of you. David clenched his fists, his heart pounding. So, he wanted to find us all this time? Yes, Barrister Ben confirmed. It was his last wish before he died, that his sons be found. He made me promise I would carry out his final request, no matter how long it took. The barrister reached into a drawer and pulled out a small faded photograph. He placed it gently on the table in front of the twins. This picture was all he had left of your mother and you boys. Is this your father? David and Daniel stared at the picture, speechless. It was a photograph their mother had kept safe, showing a younger version of their father, smiling warmly. Yes, Daniel whispered. That's him. Our mother gave us that picture. She told us it was our father. Barrister Ben's face lit up with relief. Finally, he said, almost shouting with joy, I've fulfilled Chief Lawson's last wish. The weight of the moment settled in as the barrister continued. I've been waiting for this day for years. You boys, you are Chief Lawson's rightful heirs. Everything he left behind, his will, his estate, his wealth, it's all meant for you two. David and Daniel were stunned into silence. The revelation was overwhelming. They had spent their entire lives believing they were orphans, struggling on the streets. Now they were being told that they were the heirs to a fortune they never knew existed. They sat in disbelief, trying to process it all. Just then, the door to Barrister Ben's office swung open with a loud bang. Sam stormed in, his face twisted with rage. He glared at the twins, then turned his attention to Barrister Ben, his voice full of venom. What's going on here? What are they doing here? Barrister Ben stood firm, his expression calm but resolute. Sam, these boys are Chief Lawson's first sons, his rightful heirs. They are entitled to over 80% of his estate. Sam's face turned red with fury, his disbelief evident. What? You can't be serious! These street rats! They can't possibly be my father's children! Before Sam could say another word, David moved swiftly, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. Listen to me, David growled, his voice low and dangerous. If you want any chance of honouring our father's memory, you better show some respect. Barrister Ben quickly intervened. David, let him go. He's your stepbrother, after all. Reluctantly, David released Sam, who stumbled backward, his face pale with a mix of fear and anger. Sam straightened his jacket, glaring at the twins. You think this is over? I'll take this to court. I'll fight you for everything. Barrister Ben didn't flinch. His voice was calm but filled with confidence. Go ahead, Sam. Contest it in court. We'll be ready. Sam's eyes flickered with uncertainty as he realized the strength of Barrister Ben's conviction. You'll regret this, he spat before storming out of the office, slamming the door behind him. The tension in the room slowly dissipated, leaving David and Daniel standing there, still in shock from everything that had just unfolded. Barrister Ben smiled kindly at them. Don't worry about Sam. The law is on your side. Now, come with me. The barrister led them into a separate room where stacks of documents, keys and files awaited them. All of this, Barrister Ben said, gesturing to the items in front of them, belongs to you, your father's company, his estates, his fortune. It's all yours now. Welcome to your new life. David and Daniel stood there, their hearts racing, unable to comprehend how their world had changed so drastically in just a few hours. The life they had always known, one of hardship and survival, was now being replaced by wealth, power, and a legacy they never even dreamed of. Thanks for watching. I believe you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel to get more Nollywood movie stories.